Somebody just don't know that they ain't supposed to block bus stops. I mean, seriously. The bus has got to be able to pick people up there.
Joe Biden called into, and it appears spoke on speakerphone, roughly 20 times when Hunter Biden was meeting with foreign investors, foreign businessmen, counterparts essentially in his dealings. So this points to obviously what we've all long known, which is that the Biden family's business has been an international influence peddling business that spanned from China to Russia, the Ukraine, and beyond. And it strains credulity to believe that Joe Biden knew nothing about it while he not only called into these meetings, but also attended in person, as Devon Archer testifies to, meals with confabs, essentially, with Hunter Biden's partners. And even in one instance, wrote a letter of recommendation to the child for college for one of Hunter Biden's partners. And this is all in Devon Archer's testimony. And this brings us to the other major revelation in the deposition, briefly, which is that a conversation is re-recorded, essentially, by Devon Archer, where he talks about the fact that Burisma executives are feeling the pressure from the Ukrainian prosecutor, and they want that pressure to be relieved. And who does Hunter Biden call, according to Devon Archer, immediately after talking about the need for help from D.C.? Joe Biden. We don't know what the contents of that call is, and that remains one of the issues with probing this, because there seem to have been layers of secrecy around it, just like there were numerous bank accounts through which the profits from this influence peddling flowed. But all of this gets to, what did Joe Biden know? When did he know it? What did he do about it? To what extent did he benefit directly or indirectly? And how does that impact the U.S. national interests and our national security when you're talking about his family's dealings with strategically significant entities within adversarial countries and oftentimes corrupt countries?
And yet we have Democratic Representative Dan Goldman saying that Archer's testimony shows that it's true. They just talked about the weather, and that created what Archer called an illusion of access to Biden, and the illusion being the key word there. Does that take Biden off the hook, would you say?
Well, it doesn't take him off the hook insofar as the business dealings still transpired. The Biden family still traded on Joe's name while he was in office, and by Archer's account and other accounts, having calls with Hunter Biden every single day and popping into Hunter Biden's business meetings. Hunter Biden talks about the fact in the testimony, according to Archer, that his father was coming to Ukraine and they needed to communicate to Burisma, essentially, the value of that. And Dan Goldman wants to make the case that that testimony is going to be all about creating the illusion that maybe, just maybe, Hunter Biden had some influence on Joe Biden when he said or did things beneficial to Burisma. But I believe that the illusion became reality. And the president has to answer for that, and he has to answer for his dissembling, frankly, about his knowledge of and involvement in his son's business.
Now, Government Accountability Office, they were charged by Congress at taking a look at the payments into China. They found $49 million. We found $490 million because we actually dug a little deeper. We dug into the subgrants. What nobody can follow is the Tier 2 and Tier 3 subgrants. Those right now aren't even disclosed. So the $1.3 billion just may be the tip of the iceberg.
That's wild. I mean, and one of the things that you found was $2 million going to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And we know that that was a place where there was bioweapons development being done and, all sorts of gain of function experiments and so forth.
So it's $2 million since 2014 into the Wuhan Institute of Virology. But according to the latest federal government audits, only $1.4 million was ever paid out. So let's break down the $2 million worth of appropriations into the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So you've got $600,000 that was paid on subgrants through EcoHealth Alliance from the National Institutes of Health. And these are the payments being questioned as to whether or not Fauci and Collins, Francis Collins, the former director of the National Institutes of Health, and Dr. Fauci, obviously the former director of the National Institutes of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, whether or not those grants funded gain of function. But you also have $1.1 million funding the Wuhan Institute through a U.S. foreign aid entity, the USAID, again, through subgrants through EcoHealth Alliance. On that 1.1 million, now it is said that only 800,000 was ever paid out. The rest of the payments were stopped.
But so what is the significance of that?
Well, the significance is this week the Biden administration finally, after 3 years, formally stopped all federal payments into the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So, it's about time. This is the spot on Earth that has probably received the most scrutiny out of any U.S. aid recipient in the entire federal checkbook. And finally, after 3 years, the Biden administration says they're formally cutting any additional money. But they had friends in high places. As late as May of 2021, in the well of the Senate, Dr. Anthony Fauci was testifying and answering questions from U.S. Senator John Kennedy out of Louisiana, and Fauci said he found the Wuhan Institute of Virology scientists as very competent and trustworthy.
In our experience with grantees, including Chinese grantees, which we've had interactions with for a very long period of time, they're very competent, trustworthy scientists. I'm not talking about anything else in China. I'm talking about the scientists, that you would expect that they would abide by the conditions of the grant, which they've done for the years that we've had interactions.
So you don't think the Chinese would lie to you?
Well, when you say the Chinese are a rather broad group. I know the scientists that we've dealt with have been trustworthy.
And yeah, I mean, it's either a kind of gullibility or something like that, or something much worse. I've been struggling to figure out what the nature of that thinking was exactly, given clearly the briefings that should be available to everybody about what is going on there and many other places in China and in their biological laboratories, especially that level.
In 2021, that U.S. aid agency, USAID, issued a letter to a member of Congress saying that they had paid out $1.1 million on subgrants to the Wuhan Institute. Now, the Government Accountability Office says, oh, no, wait a second, only 800,000 was paid out on that. So the Wuhan Institute of Virology, it's always been a black box with little transparency and even less accountability.
What is the
Of 2023.
Okay.
There's a $5 million payment of U.S. taxpayer money to a Russian health insurance provider that actually was sanctioned during this period of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
And it's amazing when we talk about these numbers. This is what I was when I look through your material. We're just talking a billion here, a few million here. These are actually significant amounts of money, but you kind of forget that almost as you're pouring through these documents. I mean, and we haven't even started on the earmarks here.
Look, it's a target-rich environment right now in Washington, D.C. for a watchdog. I mean, and I think the American people really get a sense, and they're tired of the overspending. They're tired of the corruption. It used to be that we only knew one example of misspending, and that was the bridge to nowhere. At openthebooks.com, our whole mission is not only to open the books and audit them, but it's also to educate the American people on exactly where your tax dollar is being spent.
Right, and I just want to also remind our viewers, for those that might not be aware, that you can actually go to openthebooks.com and search for things. It's a highly searchable, absolutely fascinating database if you want to take a moment and see what sorts of crazy things money is being spent on.
That's why we believe transparency revolutionizes United States public policy and politics. So I encourage everybody watching the program, come to our website at openthebooks.com and take a look, because we have nearly, not quite, but nearly every dime taxed and spent at every level of government across the entire country available for search on our website. I'm talking federal spending, all 50 state checkbooks, 15,000 municipal level checkbooks right into your local school district, $25 million, nearly every single salary of a public employee at every level of government across the entire country. It took us 55,000 Freedom of Information Act requests just last year to compile all of this. We do the hard work so you can hold the political class accountable for tax and spend decisions.
Well, so let's talking about accountability. Let's jump into your earmarks report. Again, there might be people who don't even know what earmarks are. So why don't you give me a quick overview, and then let's dive into it. There's some absolutely amazing things that you found.
Well, an earmark, here's the definition. It's a member pet project requested by a member of Congress for their own district. People have described it as fleece, pork, log rolling, the currency of corruption in Congress, pork belly shame, the earmark favor factory. Others have described it as legal bribery to put member votes on big spending omnibus bills, the currency of corruption in Congress. Look, bringing back earmarks, they were banned for 10 years, has been the equivalent of open bar for a bunch of alcoholics. Republicans and Democrats are addicted to spending our taxpayer money, and earmarks grease it.
Well, and it doesn't all sound that bad, because after all, every member, their job is to represent the people in their district or in their state. You would expect they would be doing some things to support their districts or states.
Well, earmarks are an end run around regular order in the appropriations process in Congress. So you do an earmark basically to circumvent the process of getting a line in a budget bill, going through committee and subcommittee hearings, having a full and public vetting on every line of that legislation, having votes in those committees all the way along till it reaches the floor, and then you get an up or down vote. An earmark is totally different. It's vague wording. There's thousands of them. It's hard to give them any scrutiny. The amounts are large and getting larger. There's no public purpose to compel, for instance, working and middle-class taxpayers in Arkansas to fund a $3 million New York earmark into an Ivy League college like Columbia University, which has a $13.3 billion endowment. So you get all kinds of these pork projects that are just, quite frankly, unnecessary.
You know, these ideas that there'd be earmarks that just go directly into large endowments, I mean, that is obviously a shocking reality, but you found all sorts of other things as well.
We did. So it just starts with some of the most powerful people in Congress 7 months ago, 2 retiring U.S. senators, one a Democrat, one a Republican, that sat in leadership positions on the Senate Appropriations Committee. The chairman, the Democrat, Patrick Leahy, he was retiring. He earmarked $30 million in the University of Vermont into their honors college. In May, after he retires, just May 2 months ago, the college renames the honors college after Patrick Leahy, the senator. He also received from the University of Vermont, from the president, a permanent position as a presidential fellow at the university. But then Leahy did it again. $34 million earmark into the Burlington International Airport. And then in April, the city council renamed the airport after Patrick Leahy. Okay, so let's go to the Republican, Patrick Leahy's colleague on the Senate Appropriations Committee, Richard Shelby, who is also retiring. He earmarks $50 million to his alma mater, the University of Alabama. The $50 million earmark didn't go for a project. It went into their endowment. They already had $1 billion in their endowment. So, Jan, think about this. They borrowed $50 million. All these earmarks are borrowed against the national debt. We borrowed against the national debt to stuff it in the University of Alabama endowment, which was already $1 billion for a school that pays their football coach $11 million a year.
So what is
27 traditional law enforcement agencies, think FBI, U.S. Marshals, these are the Secret Service, these are the agencies housed under the Department of Justice or the Department of Homeland Security. But there are 76 traditional paper-pushing, regulatory, civil administrative agencies that have now armed up. I'm talking Department of Education, Health and Human Services. Who knew that the National Institutes of Health had a police force of 100 officers? I'm talking about the Environmental Protection Agency, and of course, folks like the IRS. I think we need to scale back the federal arsenal. I mean, think about this. After grabbing legal power, these federal agencies are amassing firepower. I mean, if you dive into for instance, the gun locker at the Internal Revenue Service, so it's $35.2 million since 2006 purchasing guns, ammunition, and military-style equipment. So let's talk about their gun locker pre-pandemic. 4,500 guns, including 5 million rounds of ammunition that they stockpiled. If you break their gun locker down, you find over 600 shotguns, 500 long barrel rifles, that's AR-15 Smith & Wesson style rifles, and they want to have that command and control within the agency.
Well, Adam Andrzejewski, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you all for joining Adam Andrzejewski and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Yanya Kellick.
From a law enforcement agency to an intelligence collection agency. And you pair that with its quota system that it implemented about 10 years ago called Integrated Program Management, and just the human nature to work smarter and not harder. And as a result of that, you have manipulations going on, and the FBI is looking always for opportunities to develop intelligence products or target people for investigations. And as a result, there are people who are very vulnerable, that are caught up in a dragnet. And we can see that reporting on that over the last 20 years. And it first started with vulnerable Muslim Americans who were being roped into and entrapped into these plots to participate in terrorism where they were not predisposed to do it. And the FBI has now refocused its efforts onto conservative Americans and is labeling them anti-government extremists and is reinterpreting laws to charge them with felonies for doing things like walking through the people's house.
I want to bring Joshua Phillip in here, host of Crossroads on Epoch TV. Joshua, what do you make of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what a lot of the conservatives are looking at is what they're now calling the weaponization of the justice system. It seems that there is a two-tiered system of justice. As many people we've had on today noted, these new charges against Trump take place right after the Devin Archer testimony, talking about Hunter Biden and his deals, of course, relating to his father and so on. It looks like the timing of many of these indictments have to do directly with, evidence of that coming out. And we've seen also that many of the attacks on Trump, going all the way back to the Trump-Russia thing, seem to coincide with, for example, covering up the Hillary Clinton classified email server, and I think all the charges Trump has faced right now. You have evidence of people on the other side having done very similar things. For example, taking classified documents. Joe Biden did it, while he was a senator. Obama did it. Bill Clinton did it, smuggling classified documents in his socks. Notably, Pence did it, admitted by his own mouth. And it looks like now that people are saying, well, they're going after Trump like anything they can find on him. But you see crimes being done on the other side, and nothing's being done. And so, I'm curious, why do you think that is?
So, well, Steve, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty apparent to me that the FBI and DOJ are now just a weaponized political apparatchik for the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, or whoever is handling him at this point. And as a result of that, the mask is fully gone now. And it's back to what I said about find me the man and I will show you the crime. And just take this impeding an official proceeding charge that we've seen that's been lobbed at President Trump today and prior for the Mar-a-Lago classified documents investigation and for so many people on January 6th. That's a charge that was derived from Sarbanes-Oxley because the accountants at Arthur Andersen were shredding documents. Well, if you want to reinterpret it, we should reinterpret it for those individuals that stood in the way of the IRS investigation of Hunter Biden. They slow-walked it and manipulated the process to prevent them from having the opportunity to actually interview him. How is that not impeding an official proceeding? So hopefully the Republicans in the House that actually control the power of the purse strings and through the appropriations process are going to be able to come back early here and rein these out-of-control arms of the government back.
Steve, with regard to politicization or weaponization, however you look at it, I do want to read a statement here. President Biden said, he said this at a press conference in 2022. It's quote, well, we just have to demonstrate that he will not take power if he does run. I'm making sure he, under legitimate efforts of our Constitution, does not become the next president again. Now here we are, 3 indictments later.
Yeah, he's definitely going after his political rival, but he might come up against a problem here. If the Trump legal team is actually prepared and wants to mount a legitimate defense, they're going to have the opportunity to actually show what their argument was for the 2020 election malfeasance that they were arguing a few years ago on behalf of holding up the certification of the electoral process. If he indeed did believe and had evidence of some sort of election fraud, then that sort of negates the accusations to him, because he was out speaking out, exercising his First Amendment right, and then honestly did believe that the election should be stopped and he should retain his power as president. So the Biden administration might be actually caught up in this. They might have opened the door to the Trump legal team actually being able to present that argument to a very large audience in the country.
Josh.
Yeah, well,
Turning left where you're not supposed to turn. Even though, well, you can't see the sign because somebody twisted it.